And let's just bring in our deputy political editor, Sam Coates. Sam, the president of Ukraine there and the prime minister meeting Ukrainian members of the military at that military base in Dorset, and then they were both signing a document there ahead of this press conference. Any idea what they would have been signing there?
So one of the threads all the way through today has been the increased offer of help that the UK has given to the Ukrainians on training. The Prime Minister offered to bolster the UK's help to help Ukraine with expanding fighter jet pilot training to help Ukraine defend itself in the skies. I think that's why you saw the British facilitating a visit to a Dorset military base. I think that's why you saw President Zelenskyy meeting Ukrainians who are being trained up by the British Army, because that kind of help is exactly the kind of thing that Rishi Sunak is going to be expanding. And you saw there both men sit down and sign a document likely to be a memorandum of understanding to underpin some of the discussions and agreements that the UK and Ukraine have made and signed and sealed today. So we are just a few minutes away from a press conference. What's interesting, Sally, is that you do have certain specific offers from the UK, like this increased promise of training, which also includes a promise to begin immediate training for Marines. But you also have a promise of sanctions. At 11 o'clock this morning, Britain sanctioned a number of new companies and individuals in order to tighten the noose around the Russian regime. But then you've got this question of exactly what is going to happen with fighter jets. Now, as part of the training promise, the UK has promised in the release from earlier this morning to offer more training to Ukrainian fighter pilots to fly fighter jets. However, when asked earlier today whether Downing Street was going to actually send the planes themselves, they were told, well, it's going to take quite a while, potentially up to 5 years, to train these fighter pilots, and there are better ways that we think that we can help the Ukrainians. So President Zelenskyy coming to the UK, coming to Westminster to make one big plea, which is for fighter jets, it's not quite clear that the UK is offering specifically that. Instead, they're offering fighter pilot training, but it's not quite clear whether they're going to offer the jets. And I think that we might hope to get more clarity from Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, at the press conference beginning in a few moments' time as to whether or not the equipment as well as the training is on the table, just how far he is prepared to go. Britain, like America, like other Western allies, very keen to avoid the perception that we are directly engaging with Russia in the war in Ukraine. Hey, but we will find out more from Rishi Sunak and President Zelenskyy, who are approaching the podium now.
Yes, thanks very much. Let's listen in.
Good afternoon. Vladimir, it's a privilege to stand here today and to have you here in the United Kingdom. The path from Ukraine to the UK has been well trodden over the past 6 months, with 10,000 of your soldiers making the journey for military training and more arriving every week. And just a few days ago, dozens arrived to learn how to operate our Challenger 2 tanks. I'm told they're already mastering the art of driving these 62-ton sophisticated weapons, which will soon be making a difference on the battlefields of your country. All over the United Kingdom, Ukrainian men and women are learning how to command and control NATO-standard weapons, whether that is in drone warfare, tank operations, or basic training. Their dedication, courage, and determination is a credit to you and your country. And Vladimir, your visit here today underlines our two countries' close and enduring friendship. We will always be by your side, your staunch and unwavering friends. We both know the people of Ukraine's incredible strength and inspiring bravery will ultimately defeat tyranny. That is why we are training and arming them with the equipment they need to push back Russian forces. And as I said to you earlier today, we are also accelerating the delivery of our equipment, the equipment of our allies, to ensure that it reaches your front line in coming days and weeks, not months or years. The Ukrainian crews who arrived last week will be using Challenger 2 tanks to defend Ukraine's sovereign territory next month. And I'm pleased that today we have agreed that we will expand our training programme, a programme that has trained 10,000 troops in the last 6 months alone, to your Marines and fighter jet pilots, ensuring the armed forces of Ukraine are able to defend their country for generations to come. We must arm Ukraine in the short term, but we must bolster Ukraine for the long term. Your country cannot be left vulnerable to attack ever again. Today we have signed the London Declaration, further deepening our cooperation, and in the coming days we will mark a year since this needless and unprovoked invasion, and Russia will see more than ever that their tactics are only solidifying Western resolve, only convincing us to go further and faster to help you, Vladimir, and we will. After all, you told me last week that collective international unity is your greatest weapon, and you can be sure that we will deliver on that, not just now, but long into the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prime Minister, шановний присутні, шановний прем'єр-міністр, шановні журналісти.
Dear Prime Minister, dear journalists, dear participants, all the British. Today, together with Mr. Prime Minister, we are putting the final touches on our negotiations. And this is exactly here on this military base where our Ukrainian warriors are undergoing their training. And we began this day with some defense issues together with Rishi. And then obviously we also continue discussing these defense issues in my address to the British Parliament. And we are closing this day again with the defense issues. We have a very strong defense package from Great Britain. We've already received some significant number of armored vehicles, and we've agreed on the longer-range missiles and also the training of our warriors with regards to managing the unmanned vehicles. And I believe that together we will cover this difficult path to our common victory. And of course, today I'm not able to share with you all of the details, what we've been talking about and how it is specifically we're going to strengthen Ukraine. However, I would like to say that this day has become very fruitful, and I'm grateful to Prime Minister for understanding our needs and for his helpful advice and for the decisions that are truly helping our Ukrainian warriors to become stronger. I'm also grateful to His Majesty for the opportunity to have a meeting and conversation with him, and I'm grateful to all of the members of the British Parliament who today, during my address, clearly showed that Great Britain will never betray their brave spirit. I'm also grateful to everyone in the United Kingdom who was today standing with Ukrainian flags in London, and we saw that, we noticed as we were passing by. And thank you for your support. And today it is very clear that we are standing together with Great Britain. Together with the Prime Minister, we signed Declaration of Unity, a document that truly records principles of our interaction and mutual support. And this is truly a new level of our relations. We also emphasized the achieved level of support, whether it's in security, sanctions, political and economical cooperation, something that truly strengthens our both countries. We've also discussed our position on the international platform. My deep gratitude to Rishi and all of Great Britain for your readiness and willingness to work with us in executing the Ukrainian peace formula. And I also would like to thank all of our Ukrainian warriors, whether it's every soldier, sergeant, officer, or general. our state is doing and will be doing to make sure that on the front line we have everything in the maximum that's owned by other leading countries. Ukraine will be among those countries who has everything to defend their people. Glory to everyone fighting for Ukraine. Many thanks to everyone who helps Ukraine. Again, thank you, Rishi. Thank you to all the people in Great Britain. Thank you for all these 350 days of unity. Glory to Ukraine.
Thank you, Vladimir. Thank you for the kind words. I think we have some time for a few questions from the media. Can we start with ITV News? Is there someone here?
Hello, Rohit Khatri from ITV. Mr. President, first of all, you've made a broad and emotional appeal today for further support. But I think a lot of British people want to know some of the specifics. For example, when do you believe this Russian offensive will happen? How many fighter jets do you need? When do you need them? And what happens if you don't get them? And to you, Mr. Prime Minister, you seem to be inching towards a position of being able to provide fighter jets for the Ukrainians. Can you offer absolute clarity here and now? Will they get them? And if so, when?
Thanks, Rohit, for the question. Why don't I start, and then I'll do that, Vladimir. So, look, first of all, we've been very clear, and we've been clear for a long time, that when it comes to the provision of military assistance to Ukraine, nothing is off the table. And that's because we're determined to ensure that Vladimir, the president, and his people can be victorious against Russian aggression. And we've backed up that rhetoric with action. Last year, behind the United States, we were the single largest donor of military equipment to Ukraine, and we said that we would match or exceed that amount, almost £2.5 billion again this year. And you saw when it came to the provision of main battle tanks, we were the first G7 nation. I announced that weeks ago, something that the President and I had discussed previously. It was important in order to ensure that Ukraine could make progress on the battlefield. And I think we helped lead an international conversation which led to many other countries following us and providing main battle tanks to Ukraine. So when it comes to fighter combat aircraft, of course, they are part of the conversation. Indeed, we've been discussing that today and have been previously. And that's why we've announced today that we will be training Ukrainian Air Force on NATO standard platforms. Because the first step in being able to provide advanced aircraft is to have soldiers or aviators that are capable of using them. That is a process that takes some time. We've started that process today. That's because we're keen to support the President and his country in delivering a victory, and nothing is off the table. And our leadership on this issue is something that we all collectively should be very proud of, and I know that the President is grateful for.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your question. With regard to the equipment, that we need, of course, there's a lot of equipment we need and a lot of different equipment. It all depends on the situation, on the battlefield, on the kind of in the military direction, but also depends on what's happening within the country. You know how we are fighting against the Iranian drones. You know, there are hundreds and thousands of them, and we are fighting against them by various means, and that includes also our ballistic missiles, because these unmanned vehicles, these Iranian drones, they hit civilian infrastructure, educational infrastructure, hospitals, schools, civilians, because they are trying to threaten Ukrainians, but they're trying to make them flee, but Ukrainians are not going to flee, because that is why when we talk about this, we do need air defense systems, and we are grateful to everyone who is providing them. And that also, when we have those systems, that allows people to go to work, and once people work, obviously, this money, they'll not just go to for pensions or other social welfare, but also this also goes to support our warriors. That's why it's very important that we have everything needed to support people in their jobs. And when we talk about the battlefield, what are our priorities? Of course, armored vehicles. We know that our enemy has got thousands units of armored vehicles, back from the Soviet Union heritage, and of course NATO armored vehicles. They are the best, and yet there are only few of them. When you only have 10 NATO armored vehicles against 1,000 of Soviet armored vehicles, well, what are the chances? And we have no way out. We have to stand firm. We need armored vehicles, we need tanks, we need fighter jets, and obviously we've spent a lot of time talking about this together, and you've just heard what Mr. Prime Minister has already mentioned. And even today and tomorrow we will be meeting with the EU leaders and discussing these issues, and also longer range missiles. That's our priority, and I'm very grateful that Britain has finally heard us in that regard, and I do hope that other countries will also hear us when it comes to longer-range missiles, because we do need to push back the Russians so people can just live. And as to the offensive, what can I say? Frankly, we live in the state of war. What can I say here? We cannot be just thinking about the offensive. The offensive has never happened, it's just been a different kind of intensity. So all we need to think is that let us make Russians think about Ukrainian counteroffensive, okay? They need to be thinking about this. They need to be thinking how they should be leaving our territory. That's all I would like to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vladimir. Next, can I call on BBC Ukraine?
Вітаю, пане президенте. Дякую за ваш приїзд. Я б вас хотіла обійняти і подякувати, але
I
не
would
можу.
really like to hug you, but I'm not allowed. Why not? Please, do give me a hug,
Security. Understandable.
My question is to you, Mr. Sunak. You know that Ukrainian soldiers, they are dying every day. Don't you think that that decision about warplanes is taking too long? And and the other question is, what are your steps to clear the reputation of London as a city that is still laundering Russian money? Thank you.
So I think you heard from the President's previous answer, Natalia, about the very immediate needs, and that's air defense and long-range missiles. And that's the conversation that we've been having most recently about how can we provide air defense to protect the Ukrainian population. That has been the thing that we've talked about probably most in all of our conversations, which is why we've provided thousands of surface-to-air missiles and air defense systems, and will continue to do so, and more are coming over the next few weeks. And as the President said, probably the most crucial capability right here and now is main battle tanks, which we led on, but also those long-range missiles. I think that and all the talking that we've done and the planning for how we can have decisive victory on the battlefield and make progress, it requires long-range missiles, which currently the range is not there. And again, that's the conversation that we've been having. And again, we hope that Britain can lead. But when it comes to protecting soldiers, I think we feel very acutely the tragedy and the hardship that your country and your countrymen are going through. And we've both had the privilege of meeting some of them today. I've met some of them in the past, and their bravery is inspiring. It's awe-inspiring to see, as I have, the ordinary citizens, young men and women who are fighting to defend their country and being trained to do so here. And they go with not just our wishes and our training, but they go with our full support, with all the equipment that we can continue to provide them, and will continue to do so. But rest assured, we are here with you, with your people, and continue to provide you with whatever we can to ensure their safety and indeed their success.
Thank you.
And with regard to sanctions, I think as you saw at the beginning of this conflict, I used to be the finance minister, and we put in place, the President talked about it earlier today, probably the most extensive and forward-leaning sanctions package of any country at the beginning of this conflict to demonstrate very clearly that Russia's aggression was unacceptable and we would punish them in every which way we could. We've announced further sanctions today, but continually when it comes to sanctions, we have, I think, led. And you remember the conversations we had on things like SWIFT and banks right at the beginning of this conflict. Again, it was Britain that led the way in pushing for very strict sanctions. And as I said, we've announced further today. And wherever we can continue, to tighten them and do more, we will look to do so, as we have done today. Next, can we go to Sky News, please?
Thank you. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News. Prime Minister, if I could ask you first of all, there does seem to have been a lag between Ukraine asking for more sophisticated weaponry and it eventually being given. They asked for more advanced artillery. It was eventually sent. They've asked for tanks and they will be sent eventually. They now want fighter jets and we're training their pilots, but we're not sending the jets. Your predecessor, one of your predecessors, a close friend of President Zelenskyy, has wondered why we're not doing more. Why not send more so they can finish off the job now? What is holding the West back? Why is there that lag? Mr. President, good to see you again. If I could ask you about fighter jets, how urgently do you need them? And what does it mean for your country if you don't get them?
So, I mean, I'll take that as the first question. And again, I'd probably start with the notion of the question, because I think we have continually led, actually, in the UK with the provision of equipment to Ukraine, and whether it was right at the beginning with anti-tank missiles, whether, as you heard from the President, the importance of armoured vehicles, I think we've sent hundreds, whether it's artillery guns, again, in the next few weeks, a new set of batteries of artillery guns will arrive, tanks we've already talked about, and we're training combat aircraft for the first time. Indeed, actually something that we should have probably been doing a long time ago, because we have a long-standing training relationship with Ukraine that predates the war. But that is something, as we look forward, we'll want to continue to do more of, as we want to make sure that the Ukrainian armed forces are trained on NATO standard equipment, and there's greater interoperability between Ukraine and NATO, which is very much something that we've been discussing. So I think actually we've continued to be on the forward-leading edge of it, and we're providing things as quickly as we can. The Challenger tanks are going to be on the battlefield, as I said, in a matter of weeks. I mean, you've seen the Ukrainian soldiers are being trained on them as fast as we can, and we're providing them as fast as we can, and we know that they will make a difference. And I think the President would tell you, we've been having conversations for the few months that I've had this job, and relatively rapidly after we discuss what is necessary, Ukraine sees that we do respond, and then we galvanise others to respond too. That's what we have done, and that's what we'll continue to do.
Thank you very much. And I would like to be honest with you here. In the history of this war, there are several pages, and one of these pages, so in fact, even sections, maybe in this war, has been a very special section for our warriors, and also Great Britain providing equipment. And here we're talking about javelins as well. And then our people had to rise up, and they had to fight with what they had. We're not doing any self-pitying here, okay? What they had, they were doing, and we were just grateful for whatever we were getting. And then we turned another page, and then we turned into we all turned into fury, because Russians were just killing and murdering people, and they were raping people, and we were ready to have anything and use any kind of weapons just to destroy them. And then we turned another page, artillery. We needed artillery. We needed to work in a different direction, and this is exactly where we received some help and support. For example, in certain places. Obviously, Great Britain helped us a lot, but when it comes to HIMARS, we got a lot of help from the US, and we are really grateful to them for this page in the history of war. I think it's very important to understand that Russia has no pity for their own people. They just keep on throwing their people into the battlefield. You know, whereas we have pity and we protect our people. We would not throw them just onto the battlefield. We needed to prepare them. And that kind of marked a different stage in the war. And now we've come to kind of the stagnation phase. You've just asked me what would happen if we don't get this fighter jets or longer-range missiles, or we don't have enough ammunition, or because everything obviously is, you know, running out and coming out of maintenance. Or if you don't have this 185 artillery, you know, there will be stagnation. These people will be coming and be living on our territory, and this will pose great risk to all of the world, because they've captured a nuclear station, and they just live there, you know. And this kind of risk will be everywhere, because they are terrorists. And so without the weapons that we are discussing now, and the weapons that we just discussed with Rishi earlier today, and how Britain is going to help us, you know, all of this is very important. Without this, there will be stagnation, which will not bring to anything good.
Thank you. Next, we have Inter.
Good evening, Mr. Prime Minister. Доброго вечора, пане президенте. Я після прес-конференції до вас підійду. Буде нечесно, якщо я залишусь без обіймів.
I will come and see you after the press conference, because I would like to get a hug as well. Okay, so you've already summarized your day today, and yet I am very interested in your personal impressions, you know. Obviously, you've hardly spent even a handful of days outside of Ukraine, you know, in a different country, just under the peaceful sky. So what are your personal impressions? And what threatens me back at home? You know, yes, this is my second visit outside of Ukraine after the beginning of the Russian invasion. And you know what? I had to do two important things. And first of all, I had to express our deep gratitude of all the Ukrainian people, to the people of Great Britain, to the government of Great Britain, to everyone who had been helping us to keep our land, to make sure that we don't lose it, because this is our land, which is dear to us. And you know, I think it's amazing that Great Britain has been so active in this fight. And truly, I am grateful. We should not be forgetting everything what we've gone through all of these months. At any point, we could have lost our independence, and yet, all of that time, we haven't had battalions, unfortunately, battalions of friends and allies, but yet we had a very strong unit of friends, partners, allies, and Great Britain has stood as our ally and friend here. And I also would like to say that whatever we can do, you know, we should be doing. And this is what we are trying to do. We are trying to remember who has been with us from the very first day of the war, you know, because we will get this victory, but it just doesn't happen overnight. And, you know, our warriors, our partners, our people, those are the key, how would I put it, probably, you know, those are the key aspects that helped us to be strong and to push back the enemy, yet the war has not ended. And then there is another reason why I'm here with this visit, and that's the heavy artillery, and that's why I'm here, you know. I'm here again. We have to do what we can do. We have to come and we talk. We have to talk openly. We have to be frank. I'm the president of the country which is fighting now for the independence, and that's why I have to do everything possible to make sure that our partners give everything they can to strengthen us on the battlefield. So those are just two reasons, you know, gratitude and weapons. Although, yes, London is a very beautiful city. It's a shame I don't have time for this.
Thank you, Vladimir. Right, and lastly, Harry, the Sun.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You say that Britain led the world rightly on training Ukrainian troops, on providing arms, and you yourself on tanks. But there does seem to be a reticence to break ranks with the Western allies on jets. Are you personally willing, as Prime Minister, if you can, to send Ukraine some of our Typhoon fleet? And Mr. President, on behalf of millions of Sun readers, I'd just like to say welcome and Slava Ukraini. Boris Johnson says there's no conceivable reason for Britain and the West not to send you jets. What are the reasons that they're telling you privately, and are those reasons credible? Thank you very much, both.
Thanks. So I think you're totally wrong to say that there's been any reticence. Actually, we were the first G7 country to provide main battle tanks. We were also the first country to provide serious arms to Ukraine at the beginning, and we have genuinely led other countries, and that's something we should all be very proud of. And when it comes to the quantum of our support, second only to the United States last year, and again a commitment to provide the same or more this year. And then there's also, as well as the things that we provide, there's also and I think the President would attest to this, the very close cooperation and engagement between our teams as to how that Ukraine can be successful with all the support and training, as you're seeing here, but also the help that we provide across the board. So I don't think there's been any reticence at all, actually, and we've probably been the most forward-leaning country in trying to bring about a Ukrainian victory in this conflict. And that's why, as Prime Minister, we decided to change our strategy to accelerate and intensify the amount of support that we give Ukraine so that we can bring about more decisive victory in a sooner period of time. And that's why I made the decision to provide tanks. And with regard to aircraft, as I said, we've already said nothing is off the table. And the first step on that has to be to have people who can fly what are very sophisticated pieces of kit. I mean, if you take someone who's brand new for a fighter jet, as Vladimir would also say, it takes 3 years. Now, obviously, that's not what we're working with because Ukraine has existing fighter pilots. But we do need to make sure that they can operate the aircraft that they could potentially be using. But also, there's a supply chain around such sophisticated aircraft. Those are the conversations that the President and I are having, and making sure that we understand all the supply chain needs that go alongside aircraft like that, making sure that they can be used and used safely and kept safely. So we're having that conversation, and it's also a conversation we are having with our allies, because particularly some of the aircraft that we have are done through joint treaty with multiple other countries. And I think we've seen that with previous bits of kit that others have had to give. For aircraft, that is something that we are also involved in, because we have, as I said, there are other allies involved in the provision of those bits of equipment. And as the President said, he's on his way to Europe after this to pick up this conversation with our partners and allies over there. But where we can, throughout this conflict, we have been nothing but out in front, and proudly so. And I know the difference that it's making, and I know the President is grateful for it, and that's what we will continue to do.
Я дуже вдячен.
Truly, I am grateful. And again, even today, once again, I heard from Mr. Prime Minister the desire to provide fighter jets, and officially he declared that they can begin training our pilots. And again, not also when it comes to typhoons, not everything depends just on the decision of Great Britain. And I will be working in that direction because, again, This is how we are changing and how we have been able to change many things. We are intensifying our diplomacy, and I do believe just within a day we will be able to meet with a dozen of EU leaders, and then we'll go back home, because this is obviously very important. Obviously, all of these conversations, they have to be taking place quickly. And again, when it comes to Typhoon, I didn't even know that it takes 3 years to train a pilot like that. Come on, we will be sending you pilots who've already trained for 2.5 years.
We'll accelerate the last bit. Yeah. Thank you. And I think on that point, another example of it is the conversation we're having on long-range missiles, where again, the conversation that we're having is one that is, I think, out in front of other allies about making sure Ukraine has the longer-range capabilities that it needs at this phase of the battle. And that's a very productive conversation that we're having today as well. Good. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your questions.
Thank you, Rishi.
And that was President Zelenskyy and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak speaking there at a military base in Dorset, taking questions from attending journalists, but certainly no major announcements, certainly in terms of President Zelenskyy's request for fighter jets. President Zelenskyy very much towing the line in terms of being grateful for what the UK has offered so far, and Rishi Sunak certainly just repeating that the UK will be training Ukrainian pilots, but absolutely no pledge yet of giving Ukraine those fast jets that they are asking for. That said, the Defence Secretary is investigating what possibilities could lie in terms of offering air support to Ukraine. And we can bring in our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, who is in Westminster and has been listening in to that press conference as well. Sam, no major announcement, but what were your takeaways from what we heard there?
Well, to be honest, Sally, once again, yet again, with another Rishi Sunak media event, you came away ever so slightly frustrated by the whole thing, because clearly this is an important day. Clearly this is a day where UK-Ukrainian relationships have been underpinned by an important set of diplomacy and ceremony. But, it's almost as if everybody forgot what happened, or the people on stage forgot what happened just 4 hours ago in Westminster Hall, when the Ukrainian president flew from Kyiv in order to make one demand. And that demand was very clear. He said, we want combat aircraft for Ukraine, wings for freedom. And he made that cry just after presenting the Speaker of the House of Commons with a fighter jet's helmet to symbolise the importance of the single wish that he is asking for from the UK and from Western nations. And therefore, Rishi Sunak, when asked repeatedly by journalists, whether it was Sky's Dominic Waghorn or The Sun's Harry Cole or the BBC Ukrainian reporter who was there, what about these fighter jets? Looked almost sort of slightly hurt and injured, the suggestion that Britain wasn't doing enough. But this was the question set by the Ukrainian Prime Minister. And to be honest, Sally, there wasn't a clear answer to it. What the Prime Minister was saying, essentially, was Britain has done a lot already, and that it takes a lot to train fighter pilots, and that although nothing is off the table, there are a whole range of issues, whether they're supply line issues, whether they're issues about planes that are controlled jointly with other countries, whether or not it's the time it takes to train up a fighter pilot. All of those things, Rishi Sunak eventually, in answer to the final question from The Sun, seemed to suggest were the reasons why he couldn't just say, yes, they're on their way. And he appeared slightly sort of put out that people kept asking this single question time and time again through the different moments in that press conference. I thought you got the sort of clearest insight to what's going on from President Zelenskyy, who at the end said, look, it's not just up to the UK to do this. There are other countries that need to take decisions as well. And I think what we're seeing here is a sort of slightly diplomatically frustrating experience for the Prime Minister, who is probably trying to move at the same step at the same speed as other European and Western allies when it comes to promising the supply of different types of weaponry. At the moment, that discussion is all around fighter jets, but can't go further, perhaps, that even he would like, but feeling that he should be getting more credit than he's getting for doing what Britain has done. A little swipe, I thought, at the end from President Zelenskyy. Rishi Sunak said, look, it takes 2 or 3 years to train a fighter pilot. We've got to make sure that you have people that can fly these things, because they're incredibly complicated. President Zelenskyy turned around and looked at him and said, well, you say it says takes 2 years of training. We'll supply you with somebody who's had 2.5 years of training. And there was a sort of awkward moment at the end where Rishi Sunak said, well, we'll try and do the last bit as quickly as possible. I think that underlines the frustration on the Ukrainian side with the Western alliance not doing what the singular request of Ukraine is at the moment. No doubt that President Zelenskyy was very grateful for the support that Britain gives generally, but on the one specific that he flew 1,500 miles to London, to Westminster Hall, to ask MPs for, there was just still no note of certainty from the Prime Minister, desperate otherwise to try and get political capital from his relationship with the Ukrainian president.
As you outline there, Sam, it is a complex bit of kit to offer Ukraine, not least because of the training time, but also the spare parts, the servicing of those aircraft, which in the UK would be done by someone who's highly qualified and highly paid. Of course, the concern would be who would take care of those roles if they were to give fast jets to Ukraine. And the caution among Western allies has been this concern over escalation. What do you make of the timing of this visit from President Zelenskyy here ahead of visiting the EU tomorrow? Do you anticipate there could be more talk of fast jets there too?
I think this question is going to dominate the next few days, which, of course, comes in the lead up to the first anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I think that President Zelenskyy needs to keep the momentum going ahead of that anniversary to make sure the West's focus doesn't drop. I think that we're very conscious that a lot of the coverage, a lot of the global attention is on Turkey and Syria after that horrific earthquake. But I think that, President Zelenskyy is going to now go around European capitals making the case that he's made in London. I wonder whether the kind of line from Rishi Sunak, oh, look, it's all very complicated, much more complicated than people realise, particularly goes down, well, one sort of tonal tick that Rishi Sunak has when talking about this affair was he kept saying what the president thought while the president was standing next to him. It was a bit weird. You've got to understand the president would tell you just how grateful he was, he kept saying, as Zelenskyy was standing alongside him, sometimes letting the management consultants speak creep to the fore. Rishi Sunak saying, we've probably been the most forward-leaning country in bringing about Russia's defeat. I think that what sometimes is expected from the public in situations like this is kind of broad sort of passion, and inconveniently for Rishi Sunak, that's what's brought to the debate by Boris Johnson, who issued a statement earlier today and has been hovering in the background of this debate. But the truth is, this is a question not just for the UK, but it is a question for other European leaders and the Americans, and that's why President Zelenskyy will likely travel on to other European capitals after he leaves the UK this evening.
OK, Sam, we really appreciate your analysis. Thanks very much. And our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, was at that news conference and joins us live now. Hello, good to see you, Dominic. Of course, you asked a question to both the Prime Minister and President Zelenskyy there. And as I was just discussing with Sam Coates, offering fast jets is a highly complex bit of kit to give to Ukraine. What was your takeaway from the question that you asked, which was, put simply, why not give them everything they need now to finish the job?
Yeah, I mean, I was putting the Boris Johnson question, really, which is, as he has said, why not give the Ukrainians everything they need to finish things off now? And saying to the Prime Minister there is this sense of a lag between the Ukrainians demanding or requesting more sophisticated weaponry and eventually the West being prepared to hand that over. in a sense, it's a slightly unfair question. As Sam was saying there, you know, it is difficult for the Prime Minister because the British do feel that they have kind of been forcing the pace themselves. They have been in the lead handling over NLAW anti-tank missiles early on, and they really broke the logjam over tanks by agreeing to send Challenger tanks that then kind of push the Germans and the Americans into sending battle tanks as well. But there is that sense that not just Britain, but also amongst the other allies, there is a kind of reticence to give the Ukrainians what they need. And that's the reason why, or one of the reasons why, arguably, this conflict is dragging on. We're now into almost a year. And the Ukrainian president was saying that if he doesn't get the kind of weapons he's asking for, there's going to be stagnation, which for his country means many more deaths and this going on and on and on. And while that goes on, there's always the risk of war leading to misunderstanding, to miscalculations, and a much wider, even more worrying conflict. That's why I felt it's necessary to ask the Prime Minister why there is that lag, why there's that perceived lag between the Ukrainians saying what they need and the West being prepared to give them. I think, you know, listen to the way he slightly bristles at the question, not just because I was referring to Boris Johnson, but because I do think he feels that Britain is leading the way. But also I had to press President Zelenskyy on the issue of fighter jets, because he has been dropping a lot of not very subtle hints today about the need for fighter jets. But he didn't really clearly answer the question earlier when he was asked what it would mean for his country if he doesn't get them. Have a listen.
I think actually we've continued to be on the forward leading edge of it, and we're providing things as quickly as we can. The Challenger tanks are going to be on the battlefield. Soldiers are being trained on them as fast as we can, and we're providing them as fast as we can, and we know that they will make a difference. And I think the President would tell you, you know, we've been having conversations for the few months that I've had this job, and relatively rapidly after we discuss what is necessary, you know, Ukraine sees that we do respond, and then we galvanise others to respond too. That's what we have done, and that's what we'll continue to do.
I think it's very important to understand that Russia has no pity for their own people. They just keep on throwing their people into the battlefield. You know, we have pity and we protect our people. We would not throw them just onto the battlefield. We needed to prepare them. And that kind of marked a different stage in the war. And now we've come to kind of the stagnation phase.
I think it's important to put this into context as well, because 6 months ago or so, the idea of the British Prime Minister talking about sending advanced long-range missiles to Ukraine, or tanks even, and particularly talking about the possibility even of sending fighter jets, saying that's all on the table, I think would have been a lot more remote than it is now. It shows how far we have come. That's partly because of the kind of remorseless logic, the military logic of the kind of mission creep. If you send battle tanks to a country like Ukraine, military experts say that those tanks, to work properly, to not be vulnerable, will need air cover. Ukraine doesn't really have the right kind of air cover, not in sufficient advanced capabilities, at least yet. And therefore, there's a kind of logic to the Ukrainians saying they need to have fighter jets. Now, that will take time for them to get, but there is a real logic behind them asking for that. I think some people will see that as an encouraging sign that it is going to get eventually what it needs to see off this Russian threat. Others will wonder where we're going. Is this a spiral towards eventually Western troops ending up in Ukraine and this becoming a much deeper conflict? What I can say from this point is that we are getting more and more involved in sending more advanced weaponry to the Ukrainians, weapons that they say they vitally need because they believe a much bigger Russian counteroffensive is imminent, possibly in the coming weeks.
Absolutely. We appreciate your analysis. Dominic Waghorn, thank you.